anything. I don't have access to the book. Like, I basically knew nothing. So anytime you'd call him out on an issue, you'd say, where's the money? He goes, well, I don't know. It's gone. It's Alameda Research. Ask Alameda.
Do something like that. Like, why would he publicly communicate?
This is why it's so interesting to me to look at fraud. Like, this is why it fascinates me, as well as I think it's an important thing. It's sort of like hard. You kind of have to disprove every single, like, there's always a new, like, health guy telling you that there's some new alternative discovery, whatever. And I was like, this is kind of weird. And I was like, why do they? Very treatable kind of cancer, and she's fine. But at the time, I watched her as she's like, gets this diagnosis, gets swept up with all these hucksters who are telling her that the way to treat thyroid cancer, really taking that. I mean, maybe some of them were taking it seriously, but not enough.
So if FTX didn't encourage regulation and CZ didn't get upset at that,
of that token, then you sell it off, and then the price plummets. So you thought you had a bunch of money, but actually it's worth nothing. Like, there's all these new scams that have emerged as a result of people getting interested in this idea of an alternative. It's really interesting because it was like a battle between FTX and one of their competitors, Binance. So the owner of Binance is, I think it's Changpeng Zhao. He goes by C. Your issue is that anytime there's demand for withdrawals, you're going to encounter problems. So it was going to be inevitable anytime any store. The problem is when at the exact moment FTX can't pay you back is the exact moment that FTT becomes worthless. So you think you have all this collateral to do these trades that are profitable in crypto. So the way he first made his money was he did something where he bought Bitcoin in the U.S. and then he sold it on these Japanese. Really, everyone got to look at it all at once in one place. And people notice, like, wait a second. A lot of their assets are just their own tokens. Like, they had a Serum token, which they control most of. Touch your money, obviously. That was the whole point. It's like, you deposit with us, we're not going to do anything with your money. It's your money. It's like a deposit. Like, it's almost like a bank. Like, you deposit with a bank. Your bank isn't supposed to go ahead and take your money. LGBTQ plus causes. And it was through a guy, and the guy was like, I feel a little uncomfortable with this. And they said, well, we don't have anyone trustworthy at FTX we can donate through. There was a lot of fear of missing out, or FOMO, in the markets at the time. You know, everyone thought, oh, cryptos, you have to get in now, right? Because if you get in now from the arms of one huckster to another, like, it's just like it's almost to something worse. I used to play like a variant of League, so I know it's fun, but it's not like fun to the point. Look, this guy's whole thing was like, I'm this effective altruist. Friedberg, shady. This guy
allegedly shady.
Dan Friedberg. No, he's definitely shady. I'll say that. This guy.
What was his? I remember, but what was his?
He said, well, hey, can we restructure all this money that went through me like a loan so that we can, say that I took a loan out and I was donating, so we didn't violate any laws. They never ended up doing that. The money system has to be safe. Like, your grandma has to be able to charge back her credit card when there's a fraudster, right? Like, or this whole thing doesn't work. You can't rely on people being technically savvy in order to launch as FTX in 2019. And that's a crypto platform where, honestly, you can make a lot more money than just with a trading firm. So FTX quickly skyrockets in popularity. Change that money for some type of crypto token. There's a lot of different tokens out there. And
explain tokens, because I don't understand tokens. I know there's crypto and there's tokens. Like, what is the difference between the two?
Not having sort of like, it's maybe not big enough. They're good people, a lot of the people going after these guys, but it's like trying to catch everyone who's speeding. Like, actually, his whole technique of shifting the blame like onto Alameda and like, I don't control Alameda. I've seen something very similar. I'm investigating this Ponzi scheme that's offshore.
Or is it just pure addiction? I think, those multiplayer games, those, online role-playing games, that's what that is, right? It's like
I think it's is it a MOBA? After the fact, he's like, he's still playing video games, and you're like, can you have the decency to get off the video game and talk to people?
So bizarre. It's just so bizarre.
Act that bill, and now that it was all a fraud, or the guy who basically pushed it was a fraud, now they're like trying to retool it. I'm a millionaire by the time I'm 23 years old. Just buy my course. My course is, $2,000. Pay me $2,000. I'll teach you to get rich quick. So Washington, And I think there was like a tweet from Sam saying like, oh, like I'll see you the next time you're in Washington or something like that. But like it was kind of a dig because he knows CZ can't go to Washington. Like he would be he launches Alameda Research first, which is just like this trading firm, which basically the idea here is we have some ideas, we're going to raise a little bit of money, and we're going to
the fact that they were all living together and fucking each other in this giant penthouse, this $40 billion penthouse. The things, it's insane. It's really, I almost wish
to, like, if you're Alameda Research and you're funneling money through a personal investor, that I think is the problem. Their access, 2 months, you're going to be making 5 figures a month. 10 months, maybe 6 figures a month. And I've done it for people before. That's the social proof. I've shown people how to do this. EX said in their terms of service. So one of the really big problems was they actually weren't doing that, but nobody knew because nobody had to look at their books. Like it was very opaque. I'll have to, my feeling is offshore entities should not be, they're not subject to our rules. How can you allow offshore, like, yeah, I don't know. It's very. I mean, he was, really well regarded in Wall Street. So when people invested with him, they knew the returns were insane. But
regulators, when he was trying to impose regulations or encourage regulations, how could that have benefited him as opposed to Binance? Like, what could they have possibly done to make it easy?
Reputable people like BlackRock, Sequoia Capital, they all invest in this guy. Kevin O'Leary famously promoted it for like $18 million.
They gave him $18 million to promote it?
He says
initially he thought he was going to be able to figure out a way to pull all the company's assets together and
I think
make everybody sound and repay everyone.
God mode on Ultimate Bet, where the CEO could see everybody's hands and play on the site, seeing everybody's hands. So he just located out in the Bahamas, which is a great place to put your...
Why do they do it in the Bahamas?
Because it's unregulated. So the problem with doing stuff in the United States, middleman, because there's no one who controls like Bitcoin, like no one can say like no to a transaction. Now it's like there's nothing to stop you from sending that money, and then I too am safe because Tom Brady's got his money there. So I can put my money there.
Is the lure is like how Bitcoin used to be worth very little, and then one time it was with the high of Bitcoin.
And I'd go because it was like my friends like said, hey, we have to get somebody. You want to go? And I was like, sure, I'll go. I was like kind of fascinated. And you'd see these guys, So by the third interview, I'd studied him, and I said, okay, how do we get down to FTX's responsibility in this whole thing? And I kept coming back to it was the terms of...
Jamie's looking it up.
I thought I knew it off the top of my head, and now I don't want to say the wrong one. A16Z.
A16, 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that like there's nothing here, but the problem is that I have 2 employees, and both of them are overseas. Like one of them's in London, one of them's in Ukraine. And so for me, I have to pay them, and I have to do this. CZ says, hey, maybe they don't have the money. I don't know, whatever. I'm just going to sell like $2 billion worth.
But he knew what he was doing.
Oh, for sure. He's a shark. Is buying both, lying about it so that you can get all the good press of like caring about all these social issues while also not caring at all around, right? Kevin O'Leary's in. So you kind of think you're swimming safely with like other savvy investors. And that's what ultimately gets you to buy in. Bernie Madoff is very similar. I mean, so it's like things are good for now. Yeah.
You don't know. That
was the problem with the FTX. Like they had hidden all their numbers. Like Sam had, it wasn't like he was some random fly-by-night guy. He was well respected in the Wall Street space. People thought he might take over the SEC after like the current person had stepped down. They thought he was going to take it over. Whoa. Like, caught. In my view, what he did was criminal. That's why I started. But it hasn't been prosecuted or anything like that. But he's on a leaked private call. Everyone can go listen to it yourself. It's just this.
Like what exactly? Like what are the regulations in terms of like what you're allowed to do and donate, and how did he violate them?
So I think the big violation was you're not supposed to story broke that showed that maybe they're not as healthy as they should be. There would have been a run on the banks and people would have found out. It's just like, when are they going to find out? He happened to be the final straw, if that makes sense.
So someone would have
you can know their assets. So it's like a big thing recently in crypto. They'll say, hey, we're going to show you proof of reserves. What does that mean? They mean we'll show you on chain all our he's a shark. He knows what he's doing.
What was the conflict between the two of them that led him to do that?
The conflict was, it's a great question. The conflict was ultimately that Sam was trying to get some regulations passed, and he can take that money and you can send it to what's called a mixer, which is this like fancy language for a way to like anonymize your transaction. Like you put it, Sam goes, oh, you won like our battle. And people were like, is it a battle when you lose billions of dollars of customers? He blamed all the wrongdoing of FTX on Alameda Research. And he said, I don't control Alameda Research. Even though he was the owner, he's no longer lack of regulation and the ability to send peer-to-peer, which means like you and I can just send money to each other directly, no middleman. There's also a really huge opportunity for fraud, scams. That is his background. And so I asked, Sam, I was like, what does it say if this is your chief regulatory officer? This guy. And she would drink it up because she thought that would make her better. Ultimately, my dad convinced her, like, you got to get the surgery. Like, this ain't going to fly. You have to, ultimately get the surgery. This Coinbase, it seems like they're, legitimate. But so much of the problem with crypto is we don't know how much of this stuff is money laundering. We don't know how much of this stuff is, like, outright the proceeds of criminals. I mean, we know that these criminals do launder their money through a lot of these crypto exchanges, through mixers. It's just sort of
gotten away with it.
So many of these scams are like these issues of either regulators not having time, not having the resources. Hey, just make this problem go away. This is the CEO. Like, go blame it on somebody else. Go blame it on some third party that got access to our website. Say it was like a glitch or something. And so tokens like is the individual, you can think of currency, right? So it's like the individual. So Bitcoin is, you have Bitcoin. Then you have, it's one of the cryptocurrencies. You have Ethereum, which thankfully she did, and she's fine now. She takes medication to replace the hormones her thyroid would generate. But I saw my mom kind of get swept in this thing that I knew was nonsense. And it's like sort of what's left after the guy who kind of was spearheading this bill, like, was a fraud. It's kind of tough. I was actually randomly
one guy who lost a hard drive and who's paying people to go through a landfill to try to find his hard drive because there's billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin on that hard drive.
Yeah, people lose their something because I was just like, why does this make some people tens of millions of dollars and nothing happens? Why are actually campaign finance laws I've heard are pretty weak? I forget the name of the law, but it was passed in like the early 2000s, 2010s maybe, where it actually became very easy to donate. These guys basically, a lot of these people backed Sam with the highest endorsements. And so if you're just an average person, you're thinking, well, how much more due diligence can I do than all these other guys? Regulation for, I guess, offshore crypto exchanges, right?
And so these campaign finance, these violations.
And that video has aged so well because it's like people are like, oh, it was all true. But people were outright calling it a fraud. Like Mark Cohodes, he's a famous short seller. He wanted to basically influence politics by just donating. And the idea is you donate to both sides, you can never lose, right?
Yeah.
If you have with just put a bunch of garlic cloves in the pot. I still remember our house reeked. She would put 60 cloves of garlic in a stew. They've recently been shut down, but the idea was
just the idea of putting your money into Tornado Cash.
Yeah, it's wild.
Is there a better
balances? But oops, did I tell you about this $10 billion account? I forgot. It's so silly. It's you put one. Let's say I have Ethereum, one Ether into this mixer, right? This pool of money. A bunch of people are putting one Ethereum into fine. And then FTX US went bankrupt. And he's the one who put it into bankruptcy. And then he's telling everyone, oh, no, the money's actually still there. I mean, he was constantly giving a conflicting narrative. So it looks like, if you just look at their assets, it looks like they're covering their liabilities. They owe customers $10 billion. Looks like they have $10 billion. But like
each other on amphetamines and making billions of dollars. Like, it sounds like a great story if it wasn't illegitimate.
Yeah, ultimately that's the problem. Like, Sam was just hopped up on amphetamine. They're like, hey, don't work a 9-to-5 job. Like, be free like me. And I'm like, you're here on a Sunday at like 5 p.m. How free are you really? Like, you're just big mess right now, and we're waiting for regulators to figure it out. Finally, regulators have stepped on the scene, but right now it's just this kind of wild, wild west.
Why the celebrities are important, and that's why
it's a huge part of it.
The connection to BlackRock is important.
Huge part, yes, because they're the legitimacy that says, hey, I'm, but even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit, like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's no, you're going to make some money. And so people invested in FTX thinking that this is going to be a safe platform. This kid is smarter than everyone else. So they were paying everybody to promote this FTX crypto exchange. And the idea is this is the next big thing, right? And this is where you're going to make money. He thinks he can reestablish control because he's so smart. He is such a good liar that he's like, I can just lie my way out of it. So I think that's why he ultimately talked. His idea was, if I had a person in the space to where people thought, okay, well, if he's saying it, he's a guy who only says positive things about crypto because he's a crypto executive. So if he's saying there might be problems, there's probably some problems. And it just was kind of, I was just trying to find my way. I was just trying to even before that, I had done a show where I was like trying to break down these topics. I was like, Coinbase or something like that.
Right.
So FTX launches. Let's start with who Sam Bankman-Fried is. He's kind of at the center of all of this. Sam Bankman-Fried is this guy who he's the son of two Harvard lawyers. There were some margin trading accounts. And I'm like, no, but there were people who didn't trade with margin. There were people who just put their money with you. And all they wanted, it means playing League of Legends while on investment calls. Like, at the time, that was seen as this charming, genius thing.
On calls.
Yes. You could hear, even actually, just kind of grifting here. And so, but you'd see him in nice cars. And so I was like, what am I looking at? And then as I'm doing my YouTube show, I'm like, I get fed a bunch, they tracked his account. He's playing League while on calls about the failure of FTX.
Wow.
Just imagine the arrogance.
Is that arrogance?
Because every day it's getting less valuable. So the question is, what do you do if you're in that country making money? We don't know. I mean, there's only a few that are bigger, like there's Binance, very opaque company. We don't exactly know.
And what has happened to Binance since FTX went?
Is he on Twitter? I probably butchered his name, but he was actually originally sort of an ally of Sam. So he invested in FTX early on, put $100 million in, and a company, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, 100x leverage.
Crypto.
Ransomware. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 100%. Because before, it was like, okay, you need to use Western Union or sort of one of these these places where you can kind of send money without too much scrutiny. Found out how to be successful. And if you invest with me, I'll save you time. You could do it yourself, Joe. You could do it. But it's going to take you 5 years. Get with me, and I'm going to shortcut your success. And basically shell games where you're hiding the money.
Yeah.
You're saying, invest in this. This is going to become valuable later. But you actually own a bunch. Everyone loses confidence. Everyone sells their FTT tokens. No one wants to buy it. It's worth nothing.
So how did this all fall apart?
Great question. So money. How can you view this as a battle? But he viewed it as we're sparring partners. And you won this round or you won the war.
Because he thinks this is going to go on forever.
I
don't really understand what's going, the FTX thing, for example, is the best one. Because I was so in the dark about this thing. I was like, what is happening? What are they doing? Try to break it down for us. First of all,
it's a strange time, man, to be covering crypto because I tried to tell people for years that this scam problem, this fraud problem, then he comes up, prep school. He's kind of like built for success, right? He goes to MIT, goes to Jane Street as this quantitative trader. Okay, so this is funny. They found his League of Legends account, and during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League. This is what was going on in crypto. They're called collateralized loans. But what FTX was doing was they were saying, hey, like, we'll take $1 million from you, but instead of giving you basically screaming about, all these scammers online, and unlike my previous work, which kind of had resonated, like, it had gotten as a Matt Levine interview with Sam Bankman-Fried. He didn't call him a fraud outright, but he's like, hey, it seems like you're in the Ponzi business, and business is good.
Whoa. And what did he say to that?
They bring on people like Tom Brady to promote it, Larry David in the Super Bowl. They kind of get buy-in from all these big sort of names, and also is not surgery. You can just treat it naturally. Just don't worry about, hey, don't listen to the doctors. Don't listen to your general practitioner. You can just treat it with like colloidal silver.
Views about what? Like you didn't start doing this. You started doing just like a normal interview show?
I was just doing a normal interview show with a few of my buddies. And somebody found out about this God mode. And so the lawyer's like, how do we basically cover this up? Dan Friedberg's like, how do we, what do you want me to do? And he's like, hey, if you're from this one, you're not okay. Or I might say, hey, like CZ has connections to China. Like maybe that's a problem. Or CZ has connections to here. Maybe that's a big D. He'd be afraid of being indicted. Or I don't really understand why he can't go, but he can't go to America. So Sam was meeting with regulators. CZ felt cut out, like he was basically going to get a bad deal. Now if you're some criminal, laundering money has just never been easier. Instead of taking $100,000 across the border or wiring it where it can get held up by a bank, kept making the videos, and ultimately they never did. But I start doing that, and after I covered get rich quick schemes for a while, never understood how Bernie Madoff got people, because it seems so preposterous. And then I fell for something very similar. And what I noticed with all of these things, the thread is he cleaned up on all his own customers, just basically taking their money. Like, oh, I know exactly when to fold. I know exactly when to bet. So he had God mode enabled, and then they found out. He's like, well, like think of it like a box. And, you tell a bunch of investors, hey, if you put money in this box, we can get some money out.
Analogy for losing your house?
What's funny? Yeah.
I mean, good Lord.
The idea of these mixers was you'd anonymize your transactions. So, like, let's say I write people in charge who are going to take the fall, you resign, and then you blame it on them later when everything goes wrong. His problem, though, is Caroline Ellison flipped on him.
So she definitely flipped on him.
She was smart. Yeah. She cooperated this thing. So all this money's going in. And then you basically wait. And as you're waiting, Ethereum's going out everywhere. A bunch of people are withdrawing, right? Because they're also taking their money out.
Right.
By the time Senator's office reached out to me, they're like, what do you think about this? And I was like, I don't know, man. You guys have to, this is y'all's thing to figure out. Ultimately, everybody. I ask him, and he doesn't want to talk to me. So, but he's going on these Twitter spaces. So I was tracking when he'd go on a Twitter space, and I would contact the people ahead of time and said, hey, to their other friends, they're all saying it's okay. Let me put money in. And it's just a huge case study that just because other people, it's kind of like, okay, it's a little bit chic to be donating to Democrats. You can do that without too much, negative press. But if I'm the number 3 donor to the Republican Party, that's going to be a bad look. So before, it's like if I send you $1 and then you send that dollar on, we can easily trace that back to me, right? It's like here. But if I send $1 to you and everyone's sending you $1, and then you're sending $1 to offering FTX, the customer deposits, and was using it in Alameda Research, which was his trading firm, to try to make extra money, and he lost it.
And so this is all because
it's this guy who drives a Toyota. So you go like, well, why does he need to scam me if he's driving a Toyota, right? Then it's like, which Sam Bankman-Fried did. Then it's like, okay, I used to be just like you, Joe, but then, I found out that doing Amazon drop shipping is the way to make millions of dollars. And, I used to fail. But by these little tricks, you're just having to trust these shady offshore entities that they're telling the truth. Binance says they're fine. They show proof of reserves, but what are their liabilities? He called it fiat at FTX. But it was a $10 billion hole.
What do you mean by mislabeled?
Well, it was on a spreadsheet, Joe. So he was put it on a spreadsheet for their balance sheet, and he mislabeled.
It was like 70,000 or something like
60 plus, yeah.
So that's the lure. The lure is you buy in for pennies, and one day you're insanely rich. I'm sure you know about that.
What are you saying in the terms of service that means that I can't sue you? You have all these terms of service that basically say none of what I'm saying is true. Like they say they can get you rich in the sales pitch, and then in
Whiz kid, who you listen to him talk, he has an answer for everything. He's so articulate. He's so knowledgeable. Like I listened to previous interviews before he got busted.
And go start trading with it, unless obviously we have FDIC insurance, stuff like that. But like they didn't have that. They just take your money, go trade with it, and that's where the disaster started. Lateral like dollars or like some asset will give you FTT tokens, which is their own invented coin, and that should have value if anything goes wrong. And people were accepting that as value. But you believe, it's kind of too good to be true, but the social proof is overwhelming, and it overwhelms your kind of like alarm bells. So the social proof is a combination of things. So first of all, it's like I start hearing about these tokens, and they're like, hey, selling courses, like it's always the new grift. You always have to find, because people figure it out. Like they go like, oh, that actually doesn't work. Like, hey, drop shipping is of was going on. Now he's still like trying to say he did nothing wrong. He maintains he's innocent. And right now, actually, the big like kind of scam money to a politician on my behalf, you're a straw donor. You're not really a donor. So Alameda was using customer funds to pay off politicians in order to try to get favorable money system. I mean, yeah, especially in our modern age, I mean, it seems like you can understand where they're coming from, the average person.
Down, because it seems like they received additional scrutiny, right? Because now people are starting to look at it, and I saw that their value went down considerably.
You do not get to that level and not know that things were wrong.
Well, reading her tweets about amphetamine use was pretty wild, too. The whole scene was wild.
With regulators, they were all Sam was working really closely with regulators to try to get regulations passed, and CZ felt like he was cut out, so that stirred up this, like, battle between them, and ultimately on sticks or something. Like, it was never – the problem was the foundation was wrong from the beginning. If you don't have enough deposits to cover withdrawals, you just don't have the money, right? Her and I believe Gary Wang were big executives. They're cooperating. They pled guilty. They're cooperating with the feds. I mean, they did this.
I watched the new CEO, talk about it.
Yeah.
About him trying
That's John Ray.
Yeah. Trying to unravel it. And it's amazing.
The fact that this guy, he got away with lying so long and perpetuating this image of himself as this generous billionaire, he's sort of the next Warren Buffett, that when everything goes wrong, and like one of the first things the guy does is he controls it, but he renounces ownership. He goes, oh, I'm passing it off to some sham director, and he goes, I don't have anything to do. I don't know.
Finance hasn't had similar problems.
No, they've had a few runs, and they've covered withdrawals. I mean, so it's just the problem is a lot of it's a black box of ads, like get-rich-quick schemes. Like you've got a bunch of people, flexing in their Lamborghinis telling you, they're like 25 years old telling you want to get rich by 25 or 22. I'll show you. I made $1 million. Or you were a grandma who just put one Bitcoin on there, or, more likely the grandson. He treated all the accounts the same. So when everyone came running for the money, they just withdrew until nothing was. They're like, look, I've been screwed by the banks. Every time the government's printing a bunch of money, where do I go? Right? You can understand the appeal, but it's just like you win dark, where it's like you can donate through super PACs